Hello, loves. Welcome back to Floating on a Cloud podcast. Today, we are going to be talking with Gwen Peterson. She is the mentor of Insights and Illuminations, helping others to refocus, re-energize, and recreate their lives. She is also the founder of Spiritual Communities Network, which I am part of, and that's how I connected with Gwen, but also through FemCity Global. But Spiritual Communities Network is a global community of teachers and seekers of spiritual growth with classes and events held virtually and locally. She is also a leader of the Naples FemCity Collective. She supports business women with that soul connection. She has been featured in Natural Awakenings magazine. Well, welcome. I'm so happy that you agreed for us to have this conversation and talk more about listening to divine guidance and how you do it. First of all, let me ask, what do you refer to it as? I mean, do you say divine guidance? Do you say inner wisdom? Do you say spirit? Like, how do you refer to it?
I usually refer to it as spirit because that is more encompassing, because there's so much, because of my practice and my life experience to date, I found that there's many different layers and different things. So it's just easier for me to call it spirit, lump it all together and call it spirit.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also more received instead of talking about all the different layers that you get to be aware of as you are journeying through this spiritual journey. If I just refer to it as angels, and when spirit is speaking through me, it could be a Buddha, it could be Muhammad, it could be Jesus, it could be other prophets, it could be angels. I mean, it's not just in God and then us. There is so many different layers to that communication. So I agree. That's why I call it spirit. But sometimes when I actually explain all the layers or all the different dimensions and that sort of thing, like people are like, weird. Okay, I am not
Your
following
eyes
you.
glazed over.
Yes. So talk to me about a time when you weren't necessarily listening to divine guidance, and what was that like?
Well, that would be early on. Early on, I just, I could feel nudges and stuff, but I would just disregard them and do my own thing, and kind of got to a place in my life where, I had all the stuff that supposedly would make you happy, and I wasn't. There was a part of me that just was not happy, and just a void. There was just this void. And that is kind of what started the whole spiritual quest for me, to find out, what is that void? Why isn't it happy?
Yes. What was your spiritual journey like? How did you end up? What was that void then for you?
It was my not listening to my soul. We all have a soul essence, and our heart center is the thread that's the connection. And when we're not giving it its due, if you will, if we're not listening, if we're not letting it into our life experience, you feel it as a void because you've shut that door. So,
what was it sharing with you at that time? What was it yearning for?
It just wanted to be heard, for one. It's like, we can save you a whole lot of hardship if you just listen.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And, it's easier too for us to hear, I say hear, but, feel or hear the angels and the guides before we actually start to have that dialogue with our soul. So it took a little bit of peeling the onion before I was like, oh, it's my soul.
It is.
And so, yeah, they just, they would get my attention with different things. And I just started paying attention. I just found that it was easier if I started paying attention.
Well, how did you start telling the difference between the thought that you were thinking and something that you were receiving, or those paying attention moments?
Depending on how much I wasn't listening, was to the degree that they would get my attention. So sometimes it would come as a nudge, like, that intuition thing where people, they feel, they're like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something, or I feel like I should be, that gentle nudge.
Mhm.
And I would get that. Other times, if I dismissed the nudge and said, no, I'm going this way, ego is like, I'm going this way. Sometimes I would hear a loud no. Sometimes if it was a serious situation, and there's been some, life, real life things there that I would hear something come through. And that doesn't happen very often. So when they have to use their big voice, I listen really well. And then other times it just kind of comes through different ways. And the way I can differentiate it is that it feels very, and I was thinking about this last night. I'm like, how do you, because of the classes I do, I teach people to differentiate, and spirit is always positive. It's always encouraging. It's always uplifting. Your mind is always fearful. Okay. So if you're afraid, or the thoughts are going, well, what happens if, that's your mind at action. Spirit comes through, and there's a whole feel about it. It's very solid. It's very positive. It's assuring. And it a lot of times it'll leave no question of doubt. You might fight with it and argue that you're not wanting to do that, but that saying of, in your heart of hearts, that's kind of the thing. It's like, oh, if I don't follow this isn't going to be good, is it?
So what happens when you do listen?
I get saved a lot of trouble. Do you want me to tell you a story?
I would love it. Tell me all the goodness.
Probably one of the more recent ones was before COVID, I was attending fairs and to promote Spiritual Communities Network. And I was staying overnight at a hotel. So in the morning, I had packed up. I was all set. I'm in my head going, okay, I'm going to take everything down with me. I'm going to check out, grab some breakfast, because it had like a little restaurant, grab breakfast, head out, because it was the last day. And as I'm getting ready to go out the door with my suitcases, and I'm saying here as in, I've learned to interpret the vibration, because this wasn't a clairaudient one like the nose that I'll get. This was more of a vibrational, no, you don't want to do that. Leave your suitcases. And I'm like, leave my suitcases. No, I'm going to take my suitcases down with me. I'm up on, this was a tall building. So I was like on the 7th floor or some crazy thing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to have to be. And I was way at the far end from the elevator. Figured it all out. I'm not walking up and down these hallways, up and down elevators. I'm making one trip out and I'm done. And Spirit's like, no, you want to leave your suitcases. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, guys. Suitcases are going with me. Like Spirit doesn't know what's going on, right?
I have already seen for the next 3 days what's going to happen, woman. Just listen to me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I go and I wheel my stuff down to the elevator, and the elevator closes. Some people have just gotten on. The elevator closes, and I'm standing there, and these other people walk up, and I'm chit-chatting. And then all of a sudden I realize that the people who are in the elevator, I can still hear them talking. They're stuck. The elevator stopped working, and they're like going, we're not going anywhere. Why aren't we going anywhere? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad I wasn't on that elevator. And then it dawned on me. I'm like, oh, there's no elevator. And I'm looking at the stairs and 7 flights of stairs with my suitcase. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're going back to the room with the suitcase. It's stuff like that.
I know. And I love that example because it's an everyday example. Sometimes when people are coming to me, and I'm sure when they come to you, they may be asking like, should I take this job? Should I buy this house? Should I leave my husband? Should I, like, all these like major life changing? And I'm like, dude, you got to tune into the everyday thing. Like, should I eat this orange? Should I wear this blouse? Like what's going on? Yes or no's, right. And feel it through. And the more that you are tuning into just those quick everyday, should I take these suitcases or not? Yes or no's, then the more that those answers will be coming to you.
And it's a learning to trust thing too,
because
it's a learning to trust it because, at first, when all this started happening, at first I was kind of like, well, okay, which one was it? I didn't have, back when I started, there weren't books out. The books were in the bookstore back by the toilet next to the Wicca stuff, okay? It wasn't up front and center when you walked in. There wasn't a dozen writers. Wayne Dyer had just started his work, So let me date myself here. So there really wasn't anywhere to turn for this stuff. So I was really learning by trial and error along the way. And so I just found that if I got a nudge and I followed it, things seemed to work.
So I do now. So when you were just starting and you didn't have Spiritual Communities Network, you didn't have those communities.
I didn't have a support system at all.
Did it make you feel alone or weird?
It made me feel weird. Because there were things happening that when I would share it with different people or family, my sister could kind of get me and what was going on. She was on the fence with a lot of it. But everybody else was just kind of like, In fact, when The Secret came out, the book, way back when, I remember when that book came out, people called me and they said, Gwen, did you read that book yet? And I said, no. Why? And they're like, it's just like the stuff you talk about all the time. It's just like that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to read this book and find out what's going on. But it just, there wasn't a support system. So when things happened, I was really kind of like, what do you do with this? What? I don't even know where to go, and people, I would say, well, this happened, and they'd be like, and I had this one really crazy incident happen, and I shared it with my sister, and she was like, don't you ever tell anybody about that story. She goes, they will lock you up. And I was like, that wasn't the answer I was looking for. And it probably was a good at least 10 years before I was able to get an answer to that situation. I had to really wait for things around me to change and the world to shift. And
when you brought up trust, what has helped you to trust that it is divine guidance, that feeling, that thought, that nudge? What has helped you to trust that?
I had a big epiphany in my travel. And one of it was that, I was raised Catholic, and they teach you to be very guilty. You're a bad person. You're from sin. There's all this negativity, right? And that's one of the reasons I left the church. And I was like, I don't believe in a God like that. I believe in a God that's filled with love, peace, and joy. He's not out there to get me. I'm not a bad person, And as I was on my spiritual journey, I realized, I came through different teachers, realized that if you believe in a God that's love, peace, and joy, okay, and understand that that's all it is love, peace, and joy. When these nudges and things come through, they have that essence they have that essence of love, peace, joy. Like I said, it'll feel like you're supported, like you've got this, like you really don't need to question this. And that energy that I feel when I get that, nudges or whatever, when I get that, and it has that essence, that's that God essence, you know? And so that's how I can differentiate. Because again, going back to the mind's only fearful. It only knows what it knows. Okay. It can't go forward. And, so it's fearful of the future. And once I start to really differentiate between those two, it made a big difference. And it's not to say I don't trust it. I'll argue with it. I will argue with spirit. It's like, but I did all this work. What do you mean? What do you mean we're not going to do this now?
I totally hear that. I follow spirit's guidance a lot. I mean, with everything. And so whether it be gathering in clients or what outfit I'm going to wear today, or what the girls need for nighttime and what to eat. I mean, it's just every time. So I get this idea that spirit gave me to create how to live your chosen path. I do this program and I form my whole business around listening to your chosen path and living your chosen path. And about a year into it, Angel Gabriel comes in, because that's who had been helping guide everyone. And it's like, we're now not going to have just one chosen path like we've been talking about for centuries. And so we're just going to have a soul's calling and just kind of broaden it up. So that way people don't feel so locked into one thing. And I was like, are you serious? You just, I know I might be late to the game because I am who I am, but what?
Right.
That means I have to change everything around. You know how much time this is going to take.
They did that to me with the spirit part of it was me, but Spiritual Communities Network was divinely inspired. Okay. Because I had no clue where any of that was going and what it was all about, that and where it continues to go. Right. So spirit would come through and they're like, okay, we're going to build spiritual community consciousness. I'm like, what is that? I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what that is and how you would create it. They're like, don't worry. So when they started doing it, I named it Spiritual Community of Naples. I'm in Naples. You're going to anchor in a community. Naples, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that they were just laughing. They're like, look at her. She thinks it's going to be Naples.
Well, I'm glad it's not just Naples, because this gal over here in South Carolina, or I was in Iowa, I couldn't be part of it. So I'm glad that it's not just in Naples.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy stuff.
So, so listening to your divine guidance has led you to creating businesses. I mean, where else has listening brought you or led you to?
It's really helped me to sort out my abundance issues. When I was growing up, I was raised in a family dynamic that had all the excuses for why you couldn't make it. Okay. Why, things were hard. Only the rich get richer. Every one of those were drummed into my head when I was young. Okay. Money doesn't grow on trees. If you don't do this, you'll never get ahead, blah, blah, blah. And so I was carrying a lot of that. And once I started really listening to spirit, they helped guide me through learning how to be abundant, okay, on a whole different level of abundance that I had no idea existed at that time. And so, and a lot of people sometimes don't still understand. They're kind of like, well, what do you mean you don't have a job? How do you make things work? I'm like, I am in a place where I really trust the abundant universe. And I can point out just the craziest confirmations that, when I put my trust in spirit that they've got it, they're going to let me know when I need to zig or zag. And when I stay in that trust, things are taken care of. So they've helped me through, abundance. They've helped me through personal situations. They've helped me through the class, building, the work I do. Um, and so on and so forth. There isn't a part of my life that they haven't touched and helped me to recreate.
Yeah, for sure. So, do you have any final advice that you would like to give listeners and peeps today who are wanting to have more floating on a cloud moments?
It's kind of rote, and I know that everybody talks about it, but develop a meditation practice and journal. Do both together or learn one at a time and integrate them, but and don't do it right away. I mean, don't go, okay, I'm going to meditate every day for an hour. No, just start with like every Monday for 10 minutes, at the end of the day, beginning of the day, I don't care. But you want to really start easing yourself into a meditation practice, because that will make all the difference. Can I tell a quick story on that?
Yeah, go ahead. We've got time. I love the stories. That's how I learn.
We learn from stories, right? When I first, like I said, when I had that void situation, I could feel this nudge of, you need to meditate. And I'm like, meditate? I'm corporate America woman, right? Like, who meditates? I'm like, I juggle 10 balls at the same time. I'm this multitasker. What are you saying? I'm going to sit in a chair and do nothing? It's nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, that void was there. And I'm like, all right, I guess I can give into, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 minutes. That's it. And I started with guided meditations because I needed the distraction. Okay. And so I would sit down Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and sit for 10 minutes. And at first I thought I wasn't going to get through 10 minutes of sitting, right? Because again, little Miss Multitasker, my brain was just like, are you nuts? Do you know what you could be getting done while you're just sitting here? and then I came to realize that was the practice.
Mm-hmm.
That was the practice, learning that you don't want that thought, that thing that's talking to you. You don't want that thing running your life. And so I just started finding that, I was like, I kind of feel good after it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself Monday through Friday, and I'm going to give myself the weekend off because I'm such a good girl. So I increased it to Monday through Friday. And then it wasn't too long. I started noticing that by Monday, my life was just this chaotic mess. By the time I sat down Monday morning to meditate, everything was unglued. And I'm like, what's going on here? Because it's running really smooth during the week. Why are my weekends out of control? And I'm like,
let's connect the dots here.
I'm like, oh my God, it's the meditation. And so then I went ahead and I started doing it every day. And I've done it every day since. And just really, and it wasn't a thing of you meditate and then flick the light switch and off you go. It was meditating, getting in that space and learning to take that space into my day, further and further into my day. And when I realized I was losing that connection, stopping and reconnecting with that. But that takes practice, nobody gets it the first time out. So, but it's integral to the whole thing, because how are you going to hear the nudges? How are you going to feel spirit when it's trying to get your attention to go, no, you don't want to go down that street right now?
Yes. And it can be just as simple as a conversation. When you're talking and sharing, it made me think of my husband and my conversation when after he had an accident, he had broke his collarbone. He was in a motorcycle accident. And he says to me, I feel like this is a lesson. I feel like there's something spiritual that I'm supposed to be learning from this. And I said, yeah, probably. And he's like, well, you never have these experiences. You don't have like broken bones or in car accidents, or you don't receive information from this way. And I said, oh no, I intentionally say to spirit, if you want a message with me, you can tell me. That's how I will receive. It's like, I don't want to have the piano dropping on me or something.
Listening.
Yeah.
Because you're listening. You know, they usually when they have to resort to stuff like that, it's the only way they can get your attention.
I know. I had to deliver that message to a friend of mine, and she ended up having like a side swipe, like by somebody, like a car or whatever. And her car, their car was damaged. There was nothing wrong with them, but the car, and she's like, Sarah, why did this happen? And I was like, do you really want to know the answer? Because when people ask me these things, I have to be clear that they actually want to know the answer. Right. And they want to know the insight. So I need to get their permission. And she says, yeah, I do want to know. And Spirit's like, that's the only way that you would listen. And I was like, oh, and it's kind of rough when you have to hear that, because it's, sometimes pride or ego is like, what? No, I am listening. I've had those messages before where it's still in communication with me, but they're so off that I am like, what? That's not me. Like, that's not even spirit. Like I get like very emotional, and I feel like things have to change. And then I have to dig a little bit deeper, and I'm like, Spirit, what's going on? Like, did you really say that? Or is that just this like another energy coming in that's trying to mess with me? Or is it just my own insecurities or whatnot? And Spirit's like, we're trying to get your attention. We've told you this message in numerous ways. And if we wouldn't, and you don't want to receive it by getting hurt, so we communicate with you.
Right.
And so we had to communicate with you in this like abrupt manner that would like shake you loose. And then you were able to take action and change. And I was like, oh, all right. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And you really don't want, to have to get to that part. And it's making me remember when I was in high school, a family member had passed. And I remember my mom asking me as I was getting ready to go to school, she said, she goes, well, why don't you take the day off school and come with us to the funeral? And something didn't set right. I was like, no. I said, I'm not really feeling that. I don't think I want to. And she looks at me, she goes, what do you mean you don't want to take a day off of school and come with us to the funeral? And I said, I know it's crazy, right? I usually look for a reason to get out of school. I said, but something's telling me I need to be at school. And she's like, and she just, I don't know what your problem is. You're just there for her. So off she goes to do her thing. I go to school. I come home from school. And usually she's there. And I knew she was, doing the funeral. So I was like, she should have been back by now. Huh? So then my brother and sister get home from school, still no mom. And then later in the day, I start getting phone calls from family members going, so is your mom home? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, could you ever call us when she gets in? I'm like, well, where is she? Because that funeral was done, way long time ago. What's the deal? And finally, after a few calls, someone finally told me their car had been hit in the funeral procession. They were going through an intersection. Someone didn't notice and just broadsided them, T-boned them. And everybody that was in the car ended up in the hospital with some pretty serious, my mom was okay, but my grandma and grandpa had some serious injuries. And I was kind of like, and I'm like, so I would have been in that car and I might have been in the impact zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was like, oh, that was a close one. I'm like, and I think that was my very first moment where I was like, whatever that was, that feeling that said, you don't want to do that. I'm like, I want to listen to that. I want to listen to that feeling. And it was a very stern, you don't want to do this kind of feeling, you know?
Mhm.
And
That's
like I said, you just learn. I think you just trial and error, you know, and if it's a serious, and I guess sometimes too, the trust thing is they'll have your back, you know, they will. They'll, you know,
yeah.
they'll get your attention when you need it.
Hmm. Yeah. And it goes back to what you're saying about the joy, peace, love, that essence that is supporting you and loving on you, and that knowing that you're always taken care of. When people come to me wanting to they feel like the weight of the world's on their shoulders, and they're like, I need some sort of relief. And I'm like, but it's this shift in mindset that you are always taken care of. But then it is that work on trust and allowing that guidance in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because we all have our life experiences that kind of pull us away from who we are. And we had an agreement coming in, you know, our angels and guides would be there for us, but they also had the agreement that we had to invite them in to do it, you know. So and even though I know that after many years of doing this, sometimes I forget, you know, I'll be going along on something and I'll forget to say, hey, can you help me out here? You know, and it's as
yeah,
easy as that. It's like, okay, I'm working on this project. Can I get some help? And as soon as I ask, it's like things start coming together, you
that is
know?
a great point. I need to remember that as well. Thank
And
you
it
for
was funny.
sharing.
It was like I was checking in right before our podcast today because they started doing work in the building. They're doing some windows and doors, and it was getting really loud. About
Mhm.
11 o'clock, it was getting really loud. And I'm like, ooh, this could be a problem. You know, this noise could be a problem for doing this. And so I did a check-in. You know, I immediately sent you a text. I'm like, oh, and called you. I'm like, oh, Sarah. And then I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, I'm going to keep getting, I feel that I need to continue getting ready, do everything as normal, and everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, okay, we'll see where this, and it was like, as soon as I had that thought, they stopped. And I'm like, oh, they must be on lunch break. And
Divine
so,
timing. So
and
I'm
you know,
so thankful.
so following that, you know, following that guidance of, no, you're good. I got, you know, they gave me the thumbs up. No, you're good. You guys are good.
Hmm.
I was
That
like,
is
okay.
perfect. Yes. Yes,
Well,
using it. And
yeah. And when we turn this off, all the banging and sawing and everything will start again.
well, thanks, Spirit, for having our backs.
Always does.
And how do we connect with you?
My personal work is through insights and illuminations.com. On my website, I have all the classes and how people can connect with me. I do one-on-one work with people as well. In addition to having every Monday night, I have a group where we delve deeper into spiritual practices, different aspects of it, and you know, really learning to have the dialogue with your soul. And it's Abraham Hicks based too. So we work with the Ask and It Is Given book. There's some processes in there that, you know, the emotional guidance scale was a key turning point for me as well, because it fell right into that, you know, the love, peace, and joy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the emotional guidance scale. If
Mm-hmm.
God's at the top, love, peace, and joy, and I'm down here in depression, well, I got some work to do. So, yeah, insightsandilluminations.com is a great way to find me personally and all my work. Always visit Spiritual Communities Network. We have wonderful people like Sarah who post their classes and events there, and you can find out more about her there as well. And for those femmes out there who are business ladies who could use a monthly support system, you can join one of their collectives. I'm in the Naples Collective. We're on Zoom, always on Zoom. So it doesn't really matter where you're at if you want to be part of our group. So.
I know, I forget about that. You'll remind me of when you have meetings. I mean, you can message me, but I would like
First
to
Tuesday.
hop.
First Tuesday of the month.
First Tuesday. I'm going to write that down for
First Tuesday of the
FemCity
month at
Naples.
11 a.m. If you visit FemCity too, if you punch in Naples, Florida, it'll show all the dates that are available or coming up.
Excuse me.
But yeah, FemCity is a great way to support yourself and your work, and the collective, the overall organization is amazing for just everything.
Yeah,
And
it's a great
and then
learning tool.
yeah, and then the collectives are just a really great support system as well. So
sure.
it's integrated well with the spiritual communities work, and yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy in this conversation. I've enjoyed just chatting with you and getting to learn more. And I hope those who tune into this will also get all the goodness. So
I hope so too. Thank you, Sarah, so much for having me here. It's always wonderful to see you. You're such a vivacious, energetic, loving person. And I love to kind of swim in that a little bit with you every time we meet.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, thanks, love. All right. We'll see you soon.
Take care, sweetie.